Hello, everyone, and welcome to the lecture on effective intercultural workgroup communication theory as it is applied to the television show Survivor, specifically season 44. So, some major concepts we're going to cover today with the effective intercultural workgroup communication theory are the input process output model that the theory is based on, individualism versus collectivism in culture, self-construals, face concerns, and in-group, out-group dynamics. As we listen to today's lecture and really think about our theory, here are some questions for discussion. I'm going to give them to you now, and then we'll go ahead and review them at the end so that you can prepare for our online discussion later. So first, as we look at the theory, in what other ways can effective intercultural workgroup communication theory, beyond what we discussed today here in this lecture, affect the way the castaways, tribe mates, and alliances from Survivor communicate to accomplish goals? Second, to which other televised competitions can the effective intercultural workgroup communication theory be applied, and how is it employed? Number three, which other communication theories can be applied to the television show Survivor, and how are they shown? Perhaps one of the theories you studied can be applied here as well. And then I would love to know if you have any further questions or concerns or clarifications that you would like to discuss in relationship to this theory and or the television show and how they kind of go together. So as an introduction to this theory, we kind of want to look at what it is, where it came from, and maybe some terms that we need to know. So this was a theory developed by John Oates in 1995. He's actually one of the authors of the textbook we're reading. And essentially what we're saying is that in culturally diverse work groups, an individual's attitudes and cultural values directly affect their communication, behavior, and decisions. This theory really emphasizes the understanding and management of cultural differences to foster productive collaboration and achieve shared goals. So, kind of looking at individual cultural identities, how they are manifested, especially as it applies to small group communication, and how people balance those cultural identities to achieve their shared goals, what communication positives and drawbacks it can take. As far as some terms go, one of the things we want to look at is what is culture. When we say it's an intercultural work group, so culture is really the customs, arts, social institutions, achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. And that's the dictionary definition, like we find in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. But these social groups could be race, religion, socioeconomic status, geographic region, age, gender, family, heritage, language, profession, any kind of group. It might be a fandom or a team, whatever group we're looking at. And when we talk about work group, that is specifically an organized group of people assigned to a common task or goal. So the idea here with the work group is that they have a goal or a task. Some examples of that might be a sports team, a school project group, a department at your job, classmates, or even if you have a friend's game night and you're in a team or partnership trying to win the games. All right, let us go ahead and look at the organization of this theory. How is it organized? How does it work? So, effective intercultural workgroup communication theory is based on this input process output model. And we're going to look at an example in just a moment. There is also an example in the textbook. So, inputs, this is the flow of data, materials, the assignment that comes into the group. The process is then how that group goes about accomplishing the goal, all the tasks in that process. And then the output are those end results. Did they meet the goal? Did they finish the project? So the outflow. We see here this model. We have our group, and in this example, there are 3 people in that group. Obviously, there could be more, and the situation that they're in. So, really, this input process output model focuses on the individuals as a group coming together and going through this process to receive outcomes. The key here is that each individual person in the group is going to have their own identity, their own self construals and face concerns, which we will talk about in a moment. But balancing each person in the group to kind of create this cohesive and effective unit that works to reach those common goals. All right, so let's look at some of these important cultural elements, differences. What impacts the effective intercultural work group communication? The first thing we're going to look at is individualism versus collectivism as it applies to the effective intercultural work group communication theory. So, according to the text by Goody Kunst, um, in individualism, it's just what it sounds like. Individuals. People look after themselves. They are concerned with their own goals, their objectives, their viewpoint. Um, and in collectivism, it's more about the group. What can the group do? I belong to this group, so I'm going to serve the group. When we talk about a communication, individualism then is going to communicate much more directly, and they're going to be concerned with clarity. Give it to me straight. They're going to belong to several groups, but no one group is going to really define who they are. With a collectivist mentality, they're going to be much more about the group. So, therefore, they're not going to want to create conflict. They will be a little bit more indirect in the way that they communicate. And they only really belong to a small, select number of groups. And so, those groups have much more influence on each individual person. Next, within this theory, we're going to look at self-construals. So this is, how does a person see themselves? How do they define themselves? What is their perception of who they are in relationship to others? So when we talk about self-construals, self-view, we talk about two things, which are interdependence and independence. Interdependence is that relationship to other people. So much more that collectivist mentality, collectivist culture where they want to be with the group. Whereas independent, as it seems, would go with the individualist kind of cultures. You are your own person, you are unique, you are different, you are the focus. So, how people see themselves is going to affect the way that they communicate in these work groups. Next, we are looking at face concerns. So, how are they kind of thinking about what's important? So, we have three things here. One is self face. It's all about me. It's all about the individual, concern for one's own image. Other face, it's all about the you, concern for other people. And then mutual face is the us, kind of the group mentality, the relationship, really focusing on how they are relating to each other. So that me, you, us mentality, again, we can see how that goes in with individualist versus collectivist cultures, as well as how that goes with self-construals. And the last kind of cultural aspect or difference we want to look at is the in-group, out-group dynamic. So in-group, you are part of the majority, you identify with that group, you are the center. So it's about belonging. Whereas the out group, those are people on the outside of the group. They do not belong to the group. They are the others. With communication and work group, this can work both ways. Benefits is that in groups tend to be more cohesive, they communicate well, they accomplish tasks well. However, in groups do tend to favor their own, they support their own group, they work with people who they identify with. And then on the outs, they're that out group bias, where if someone is on the outs or part of the out group, they are intentionally excluded or perceived as different or not as involved. So we do have these in group out groups as far as workplace communication. Within this theory of effective intercultural workgroup communication, there are going to be some difficulties, some barriers, both with cultural perception and with the communication that goes with it. So here we do have some difficulties. This is communication, the idea of equal participation. Are people getting equal amounts of time to share, to exert their opinions, or doing equal work? Unanimous decision making. Is everybody cohesively coming together to make decisions? Is everyone on the same page? Conflict management, for people who have different conflict resolution styles, or maybe individualist versus collectivist, that can sometimes conflict when you are trying to solve problems. And then being respectful, making sure that people's cultural biases don't impact the respect that they are giving to their team members. In addition, we have some situational difficulties. If there is unresolved conflict, and this is outside conflict impacting the in group, impacting this work group, other things going on outside of the group that affect the group's communication. Also, we have an in group, out group balance. Are there exclusions being made because somebody is in an out group, or is outside input necessary, and how the in group receives that? In a lot of work groups, especially intercultural work groups, you might have cooperative versus competitive natures. Some people want to work together, they want to be cohesive, whereas others are treating their teammates, their work group members, as competition, and they actually are trying to um, be more than, or kind of seen as hierarchically better than. And then also status difference. Within a work group, we might talk about corporate structure, corporate hierarchy, and how that can impact how these work group um, come to work on their process or goals and have these effective communication. Okay, so now that we talked about this theory, let's apply it to Survivor. Specifically, we're going to look at Survivor 44. However, you can really apply this to any of the seasons of Survivor. The game is pretty standard. For those of you not familiar with Survivor, it is a reality competition show. You can watch it on CBS. They're just finished the 44th season, which means they've been doing this for about 22 years. So from the Survivor website through CBS.com, here is how they kind of portray their own show. And this is specifically, again, for season 44. Stranded in the beautiful islands of Fiji, these 18 determined new castaways will be divided into 3 tribes of 6 and forced to form a new society as they adapt to their physical and social surroundings. The mental and physical challenges force players to choose between personal risk and reward while still navigating the complex social game and attempting to forge alliances to last another day. The individuals competing are from diverse backgrounds with the same ultimate goal: to outwit, outplay, and outlast, and ultimately be crowned sole survivor. So we can already see how some of this terminology is playing out with the effective intercultural workplace communication theory. Diverse backgrounds, common goals, complex social alliances. And we're going to look at all of that right now. So, as we connect the effective intercultural workgroup communication theory to survivor, we do look at intercultural, right? 18 diverse strangers. They are all ages, genders, occupations, ethnicities, race, etc. So, they all have kind of a very diverse cultural identity. The work group, the idea of having a common goal, absolutely. They will have common goals. Everybody has the same goal, which is to win. But within their tribes and alliances, they're going to have many challenges and votes that they're going to have to come together to make decisions and to accomplish tasks. We're again going to go through these 5 major concepts: the model, the individual collectivism, self control, space concerns, and in group, out group, as they apply to the TV show. All right, so if we look, here's just kind of a visual, those 18 survivors, a little bit about each of them and how it kind of works with this group dynamic here. A little bit more, if we kind of go into who they are, we'll see how this all works. If we kind of go through, you can see they are there's lots of differences, ages, their backgrounds, maybe their status in society, their education levels. And of course, then that's going to come with differences in personalities. So if we look at this individualist versus collectivist, all 18 of those individuals are individuals, right? They each want to outwit, outlast, and outplay the others. Each one, there's only one winner. So they must kind of keep that individualist mentality. They have to kind of figure out how to further their own game through their relationships. There are individual challenges where they can win individual immunity or prizes. And it is for $1 million. So at the forefront is, how do I win? It's the individual. Yet there is this idea of collectivism. Immediately, all 18 are put into tribes. There's 3 tribes during this season. We'll look at that in just a moment. And within those tribes, there is tribe immunity. So they're each tribe is competing against each other. But within each tribe, you're going to have these in groups, these alliances, and they need each other. They need these relationships to get to the end because they need people to vote with. They need people to scheme with. And at the end, the winner is decided by a vote of everybody else. So they need those relationships, those positive relationships, to make sure when they get to the end, they have people who are going to vouch for them. So this nice kind of chart just shows the 3 tribes. At the beginning, everybody is put into a tribe, those 3 tribes. There's a nice balance again, of people there. You're seeing representation, kind of gender, age, backgrounds. So they are random and balanced groups, but very diverse groups. So those would be their collectivists in groups, but then each person playing for themselves. With self-construals, I kind of have 2 examples here, the way they see themselves. So 2 very different players. Our first person we're going to look at is Danny. He came in. He came in and he really saw himself as a leader. He was aggressive, but he had a lot of bravado. So his kind of self-control, he saw himself as the guy to beat, the guy to take out, the one who was going to come in and lead everything. Whereas example number 2, Carolyn, she was a player that came in with some insecurities. She knew she was awkward. She knew she was different. She wasn't sure how people were going to take her. And she kind of lived in that. So again, one isn't better or worse. It was just how they perceived themselves in relationship to the group. Danny automatically saw himself as a leader and he acted as such. Carolyn automatically saw herself as somebody in the out group, and it affected the way she communicated and kind of went into the game. She held back a little bit. She wasn't quite as dominant in some things, but both played good games. Next, we look at face concerns. So that self face, other face, mutual face. So with self face, the concern for one's own image, the example we're using here is Carson. When he came in, he's the youngest. He was 20, still a college student. And he admits he put on like 50 pounds worth of muscle because he was so concerned that other people were going to see him as like a weak nerd. And again, kind of this perception that he wanted to really focus on his own image and what he thought of himself and how others would perceive him. On the other side, this other face, mutual face, I'm using Franny and Matt together because they were both concerned for the other. Franny, especially so. Franny and Matt immediately had a bond, and they became kind of an alliance of two. Uh, and she was so concerned with Matt's image that if they were seen too much as a power couple, it might affect Matt's game, and they had to be careful with that. Whereas Matt was really concerned about their relationship. He really connected with Franny and he wanted to make sure that they were nurturing that relationship. And they were both right. Franny was right that others would perceive them as a threat for being a power couple. But Matt was also right because a year later they are still dating. So it did work out. Both of them had the right idea, just looking at it through different lenses. And by communicating this all out to each other, they were able to kind of prolong each other's life in this game. When we talk about in-group, out-group, so that's the next thing. Um, According to the article by Hansen, the idea here with Survivor is that the better job a player in the game does at fostering an in-group identity, the further the contestant will progress in the game. So the example here is Carolyn, Carson, and Yam Yam. If we went back to those tribes, you would see Carolyn, Carson, and Yam Yam from day one. They were on the same tribe together. They formed an alliance and they built trust. They built relationships. They built a bond and they made it to the final four together by forming their own in group, being true to themselves, being true to that in group, and really kind of having that mentality of needing each other and working together toward that common goal despite their differences. Vast age differences, um, from 20 to 40, vastly different cultural backgrounds, but they were able to take their differences and turn it into a productive work group environment and reach their goal together. They made it to the final four. So that was as far as they could get together. And they did it because they stayed true to their in group. All right. So, considering all of these things for effective intercultural work group communication theory and how they're applied to Survivor, we want to look at this emphasis on the understanding and management of cultural differences to foster productive collaboration and achieve shared goals. In Survivor, we see that where tribe mates must establish trust and develop positive relationships within the work group to enhance cooperation and collaboration. Additionally, when we're talking about effective intercultural workgroup communication theory, acknowledging and adapting to diverse communication styles, including verbal and nonverbal cues, directness, indirectness, the use of context communication. So we see this in the TV show during challenges or tribal councils where there's competition and strategy. Communication is more strategic, concise, and to the point. And then, in contrast, during social interactions or alliance discussions, a more relaxed and open communication style is done. So, that in group, out group, individualist, collectivist, all kind of in play here as these castaways work towards their individual and common shared goals, that process of achieving a common goal to get to the end. and eventually win. In review, our discussion questions, looking at our theory beyond what was discussed here, do you see any other way we could apply this theory to the Castaways, the Trimate Survivor in general? 2, are there other televised competition and reality shows where we can apply the effective intercultural work group theory, communication theory? Um, and then, are there other theories? Have you worked with a theory that you know that could be applied to the show? Or do you have concepts or ideas you'd want to talk about there with other communication theories in Survivor? And then finally, what other things can we talk about, or do you want to talk about, do you have questions of or arguments for in regards to communication theory, specifically effective intercultural work group communication theory and Survivor? I'm looking really forward to seeing all of that in the discussions as we continue this week. Again, thank you for listening to this lecture on effective intercultural work group communication theory as it applies to Survivor Season 44. If you would like to have any further research, we do have lots of sources here. I'll post those again on the discussion board if you wanted to look into it further. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.